In general, how long have you been with the center and what issues do you work on?
I started in 2003 working on what we then called national missile defense. I've subsequently worked on nuclear non-proliferation issues, but as the senior military fellow, I work generally on important security issues such as Iran and Iraq.
That's where I wanted to ask my first question, the war in Iraq. There have been many comparisons made between the war in Vietnam, a conflict in which you served, and the current situation and conflict in Iraq. What, if any, similarities and differences do you see between Vietnam and Iraq?
Well, a hauntingly similar situation is the current effort in Iraq compared with what occurred in Vietnam in March of 1968. At that time, both the Secretary of Defense and the President knew that the war was not winnable militarily, just as our current military commanders and even the President know we cannot win the conflict in Iraq militarily. But the President then did not want to be tarred with losing a war. And so, not knowing what else to do in the spring of 1968, we had a surge of 25,000 more troops. At that point, there had been 24,000 Americans killed in action. 5 years later, when we finally withdrew, there were 34,000 additional casualties, and the settlement that we got surely was no better than we could have had at the time of the surge.
Well, General, it seems that President Bush has taken a page out of the Vietnam-era playbook. He has now enacted his own surge, and General Petraeus and newly appointed Ambassador Ryan Crocker are due to report to the Congress in September on the success of the surge. What do you expect them to say? Do you think the surge is going to work, and will it affect what Congress does thereafter?
Well, I'm afraid that it's highly unlikely that the surge can be successful. When we began to combat the insurgency, our troops had not been trained in counterinsurgency operations. So we employed the doctrine that we had at the time, one designed to fight large-scale conventional wars, to try to kill enemy combatants in the shortest possible time with the fewest possible friendly casualties. And of course what this implies is aggressive offensive operations with the heavy use of firepower. And in so doing, we inflicted large numbers of civilian casualties and collateral damage. And we have alienated a high proportion of the Iraqi populace. So trying to go in now to protect the population, to win it over so it won't support the guerrillas, is simply way too little, way too late.
Now, shifting gears from our military tactics to some of our diplomatic tactics, last week there was a conference in which 60 countries came to discuss Iraq, and one of the things that they agreed to was $30 billion in debt forgiveness and a few other measures. How do you see the role of regional actors like Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, and others to help try to find a solution to the catastrophe in Iraq? And how should the U.S. deal with Iran, Syria, and these other regional actors to try to save ourselves from the mess we've created in Iraq?
It's extremely important that we engage Iraq's neighbors to take a position that we are rewarding people if we deal with them for bad behavior is simply nonsensical. There is no way to stabilize Iraq without the cooperation of Iraq's neighbors. Fortunately, it appears that the neighbors have no vested interest in anarchy in Iraq any more than we do. And if we work closely with them, I think there's a prospect that we can get their cooperation, at least to preclude anarchy.
And as a follow-up to that, what is the international community and regional actors' role in trying to solve the humanitarian crisis in Iraq right now? There are reported to be over 2 million internally displaced persons that have now spilled over into neighboring countries. What do you see the international community doing to try to stave off these overflow of refugees?
Well, as I understand it, there's some 2 million external and nearly that number internally that have been displaced. So clearly there is a huge humanitarian problem involved, especially in Jordan and in Syria. We agreed to take in only a few hundred Iraqis into our country. We must do much more. We have created that situation by our invasion. We have a moral obligation to assist in its solution in cooperation with Iraq's neighbors.
General, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We greatly appreciate it, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Pleased to participate.